the International Soccer Preview. We are Soccer Files Canada. Welcome to Series 20, the 2023 African Cup. This episode is looking at the players of Nigeria. Here we go. Hello and welcome to the International Soccer Preview by Soccer Files Canada. I'm Kevin, and this is a continuation of Series 20 on the 2023 African Cup, played in 2024. We've done a full and short version on the groups and teams, and now we're looking at the players of each team, this episode covering Nigeria's players. We're doing this mediacast in two parts. Part one here is looking at the candidates of the squad and their likelihood of making it. And part two will come out when the squad lists are released and the final squad selected. We think that'll be in early January. At that time, we will go back over the list we compiled today and see who made it and who didn't. And we'll also cover a few other things that I'll talk about at the end of this mediacast. We did do a series on the 24 teams of the African Cup. That was a 2021 African Cup played in 2022, and we covered Nigeria's players there. Since that was quite recent, we're taking this opportunity to experiment with our format. Here, for the teams we've covered before, we'll be trying out our spotlight system, going into detail only on the players that we predict will be starters, and basically just updating information on the less likely players since our last look at them. But we will be posting links in the show notes to the previous mediacast we did, and that will offer more details on a lot of the supporting players. We have made a separate video on what we'll be covering over the next 9 months. YouTube watchers can see the link to that on the screen, and it can also be found in the show notes for both watchers and listeners. In short, we've just completed our series on the groups, teams, and players, or part one of the players, for the 2023 Asian Cup, which is also in early 2024. And now we're focused on the 2023 African Cup. A bit confusing that they're both in 2024. We've also started our coverage on World Cup 2026 qualifying, and that's what we'll focus on after these two cups. So this episode will have three sections. Section one, where we give some general information on the team. Section two is where we look at the main candidates in each position and judge their likelihood of making the squad. And section three, where we give any closing thoughts and preview part two in more detail. So we actually start with some opening thoughts here. But the fact is, I didn't really see anything outstanding as I was kind of updating the players and preparing the list. So I think we're going to leave that until the end. Let us go on to the next section, which is retirement. And we have nothing here, actually. No players. It hasn't been long since they played their last tournament. And we don't have any veterans who have stopped playing. Well, we do, in a sense. We have some veterans who haven't been called up necessarily for a little while, but we don't know them to be retired, and there is a chance they'll return to the team. So no veterans that we know have retired from the club since the last African Cup. Let's take a look at their club affiliations, and you know, they do have some good domestic clubs in Nigeria. However, most of the players selected for the national team are those with bigger clubs, especially in Europe. But right now, we do have a couple of clubs contributing players to the national team. In Yimba, Rivers United, and Bendal Insurance. And most of those are contributing very young players, and you know, chances are that if they become part of the national team, they'll also move and play in Europe. So really with Nigeria, we're talking about players who play outside of the country. And apart from all the major European leagues, so we're looking at, you know, Italy, England, France, Germany, Belgium, Portugal, Spain, and so on. we have Israel and Turkey besides. Several play in Turkey. I think just the one in Israel. And if we spend too much time on big names, we could take up a lot of time. But the biggest names that they play for are Bayer Leverkusen in Germany, Porto in Portugal, AC Milan in Italy, and Fulham in England. But you know, almost all of the players play for at least second-tier teams in the big countries. Okay, let us take a look at their recent games. So when we look at the candidates' likelihood of making the final squad, we're basically looking at their participation, how much they've been called up over the past 2 years since the African Cup. I'm going to say in 2022. Maybe I'll call it the 2022 African Cup just to make things clear. It's actually titled the 2021 African Cup. So we'll go over the games here that we'll be looking at. Not too interested in the results, actually, and more interested actually in the formations. But anyway, we begin with the 4 games of the African Cup 2021, which was in January 2022. And there they played Egypt, Sudan, Guinea-Bissau in the group stage, and they were knocked out by Tunisia in the round of 16. After that, in March, they had the playoff round, final playoff round. Sorry, just missing a graphic here. That was in March of 2022, and that was a home and away game against Ghana. So the final round of the playoffs. Of course, they tied both games, but lost in the end to Ghana, and it was Ghana who went on to the World Cup, even though Nigeria were favourites there. Next we have some friendlies. In May of 2022, they met Mexico, and in June of 2022, it was Ecuador. In June of 2022, they played the first 2 of their 6 games of qualification for this African Cup. So 2 games in June 2022, those were against Sierra Leone and Sao Tome and Principe. The national team also played some games for the African Nations Championship, but we're going to kind of ignore that because it's not the first team players that play those games. You have to be an African-based player to be on the team there, and we have very, very few. So we're going to ignore it, basically. So we go to September friendlies. And in September 2022, they had a friendly against Algeria. None in October, although many teams did. And in November, they had 2, Costa Rica and Portugal. And I will say that these 3 games, especially against Costa Rica, were very experimental, almost, you could say almost a B team trying out new players there. And to a degree over all 3 of those games. However, next was African Cup 2023 qualifications. So the next 4 of those games, 2 of them were in March 2023, and both of those were against Guinea-Bissau, who they meet here. They're grouped with them in the African Cup here. And then in June 2023, the reverse fixtures against Sierra Leone and Sao Tome and Principe. So obviously they advanced from that group because they're here. We go to October 2023, and they were friendlies against Saudi Arabia and Mozambique, who is also in this tournament. And finally, they have their November games. Those are World Cup qualifiers. So they began World Cup qualifying in November, and those games were against Lesotho and Zimbabwe in 2023. So as we said, we're not too concerned in this media cast about the scores. we're more interested in the formation. So let's take a look at that. Actually, it was very linear, let me say, for Nigeria. In the first 3 games, the group stage games of the African Cup in January 2022, they went with a 4-2-2-2. So that's a variation on the 4-4-2, which we'll see that they used a lot as well. And then in the last game against Tunisia, they went with a 4-2-3-1. And despite that not being successful, that was the formation they used against Ghana in the World Cup qualifiers in the first game. And in the second game, they used a 4-1-4-1. That wasn't successful either. Maybe that's why they went back to the 4-4-2 from then on. So from then on, May 22 till now, they have always used a 4-4-2 or that variation that we saw in the African Cup, a 4-2-2-2. But in fact, mostly it has been just a straight out 4-2-2. One time they tried another variation on it, the 4-4-1-1. So very predictable formations there. So I'll just put that in the graphics. 4-2-2, 4-2-2-2 in the African Cup, and a little bit after 4-2-1-3 a couple of times, but it didn't get them great results, and a 4-4-2 most of the time. So recent formations, it's been the 4-4-2 in I think it must be 10 games in a row now, or all 14 games since June 2022, where they used a 4-4-1-1 against Portugal in that friendly. Okay, so when we go through the players, keep that in mind. It's a 4-4-2, so we'll generally have 2 central defenders, a left back and a right back, 2 central midfielders with a left winger and a right winger, and then 2 forwards up top. The last thing we look at here is upcoming games, pre-tournament friendlies. We're doing this mediacast here in the 3rd week of November, and there are none scheduled yet. Okay, let us go into the main section of the podcast then, or the mediacast, and we will begin with the we're looking at the candidates here. We'll begin with the managerial situation. So I'm going to put a couple of names up. I'm going to put up Gernot Rohr, but I'm going to put him in red just to indicate that he's not the manager right now. And I'm going to put up Augustine Iguaboen, who is also not the manager, but I'll tell you the story. Okay, so Gernot Rohr was sacked a month before the 2021 African Cup. So the reasons given were that he got poor results against some weaker teams, which doesn't ring true because he qualified them not only for the African Cup, but for the final playoff of the World Cup as well. So fans were reportedly unhappy about it. Nevertheless, he was gone, and Iguaboen, who basically has been on the administration of South Africa for some time, came in for the 4th time as interim manager, and actually didn't do very well. He led them to a disappointing round of 16 finish, and he also oversaw their failure to reach the World Cup in those final playoff games against Ghana in March. He was replaced in May 2022 by the new hire, and that is Jose Peseiro. So he is the manager that will lead them through this tournament. Meanwhile, Iguaboen returned to his position as technical director of Nigeria, so he's kind of still in the administration there. Let's take a closer look at Jose Peseiro. So he actually has been through an international tournament before. He was manager of Saudi Arabia from 2009 to 2011, and he managed them through the Asian Cup. They didn't do well, actually. They lost all 3 games, and he was fired afterwards, but he has been through an international tournament. He's been the manager of some big clubs. I won't go through them all, but a lot of them are in Portugal. So Braga in Portugal, Al Ahly in Egypt, Porto in Portugal, as well as Sporting Lisbon. And recently he was manager of the Venezuela national team in 2020 and 21. He didn't go through an international tournament with them. Now he is manager of Nigeria, and as I say, will lead them through this cup. Okay, let us begin with goalkeepers. So we will introduce the name of the player and their likelihood of making the squad, and then basically update information since the previous cup. And after, at the end, I'll give kind of a little summary or a narrative on the position itself. So first we have definite candidate Francis Uzoho. Francis Uzoho still plays for Omonia in Cyprus, and he was part of the squad for the African Cup, previous African Cup. However, he was not the starter there. He was the second string keeper. He appeared only in game 3, which was a B team game there. However, he's since taken over as the starting keeper, starting 16 of their 21 games over the last 2 years, on the bench for 3 and not selected for just 2 matches. So we will come back to him and give a little more information because he will be our spotlight player. Next, we jump all the way down to possible, and we have Maduka Okoye. Okoye is with Udinese in Italy now. He moved. He was with Watford in England, and prior to that with Sparta Rotterdam in the Netherlands. So really kind of getting around there. Okoye was born in Germany, and he was the starter in the 2021 African Cup there, so starting 3 of the 4 games. But immediately after, he lost his starting position. So over the 21 games, he started 3, was on the bench for 4, and then not selected for 14 others. So whatever happened there, he was a starter at the beginning. Got the odd appearance. However, he did return in October 2023, so that was one of the games he was on the bench for. So maybe it means he's coming back into the fold. Probably, I wouldn't be surprised if he is, because the other candidates we have here don't have much experience. So the next one is Ojo Olorunleki, and he doesn't have any caps for the national team. He got his first appearance on the bench in May 2022 and started none of their remaining 15 games, but he was on the bench for 6, including the last 2 matches. So he's one of the few players actually in playing locally for Enyimba in Nigeria. So he was basically on and off the bench over the last 2 years, but because he was selected for the last 2 games, we have to consider him a possible candidate. And actually, the same is true for our next candidate, Amas Obasogie. So he too has no caps for the team, and he also plays in Nigeria with Bendal Insurance. And in his case, he got his first appearance on the bench in November, so a little later than Olorunleki. Oh no, sorry, that was November 23. So he just showed up recently and didn't start either of those games, but was on the bench for both. So we have Okoye coming back to the bench in October, and Olorunleki on the bench in November, as well as Obasogie. And finally, we have Adibo Adeleye. who got his first appearance on the bench in June 2022. And he did start one of the games, started one of their 13 remaining games, and was on the bench for 7, but wasn't selected for 5 matches, including the last 2 matches. So actually, he looked like he was kind of the backup keeper because he replaced Uzuho. However, not selected for the last 2 matches. So that's a bit mystifying. So let's take a look at the situation in summary. Okoye was the starting keeper in the African Cup, but Uzuho was the backup, as we saw, because he played the B team game. However, as soon as the cup ended, Uzuho took over the starting position, and he missed only 2 games and was replaced by a different keeper each time. The first keeper that replaced him is gone. The second keeper is Adelaide. So he's the only one of the possible candidates who actually got some field time. So the matter of starting keeper is very clear, but who the backups will be is not. Surely they will bring Okoye for his experience. But both he and Adelaide were left off the bench in November, and 2 players with no caps, Olorunleke and newcomer Obasogi, were called in. So that is quite confusing. My own feeling is Okoye and Adelaide will be the best choices. Okay, and let's do our spotlight on Okoye. So I'm going to highlight him in green, and we're doing this to kind of show that he is a likely starter. So we'll give a little more detail. Uzuho has been with Nigeria since 2017, and he has 34 caps and is 23 years old. We saw that he plays for Omonia in Greece. But he's sorry, not in Greece, in Cyprus, and he's been with several teams in Cyprus actually, but also teams in Spain. And he was interestingly part of the Aspire Academy Youth Club in Qatar from 2016 to 2013 to 16. He was a starting keeper in the 2018 World Cup, but then seemed to lose the starting position for the 2019 African Cup and the 2021 African Cup. But now he is back in the driver's seat and almost certainly the starter for this cup. Okay, that's goalkeepers. Let's move on to defenders, and we'll look at central defenders. So we have a definite candidate in Semi Ajayi, and he is still with West Bromwich Albion in England. He's been there since 2019, and actually he was born in England, and he did play in the African Cup in 2021, but was a B team player, so he only started in game 3, that B team game. Otherwise, he subbed into 1 game there. However, well, he returned after a 10-month absence in January of 2022 to play in that tournament, and he started 11 of their remaining 21 games. He was subbed in for 2 and on the bench for 5. So just 3 matches he missed, one of those due to injury. So Semi Ajayi, he will be our spotlight candidate. Next, we have 2 likely candidates. The first one is Calvin Bassey, and he is actually new to the squad. He's born in Italy. He got his first appearance actually back in October 2021, so before the previous African Cup, but he wasn't called up for it. Over the past 2 years, Bassey started 12 of their 21 games and was subbed in for 3 and on the bench for 2. On the bench for 1. 5 matches that he wasn't selected for, but those include the first 4 matches of the African Cup. So he's basically always been called up since. So I'm going to make him a spotlight candidate too. So we'll come back and look at him in a little more detail. Finally, we have in the likely category Kenneth Omaru. Kenneth Omaru is a veteran with the team with 62 caps, and he, since we last looked at him, he was with Leganes in Spain at that time. He has since moved to Kasımpaşa in Turkey. In fact, his third stint with them. And sorry, I was just kind of correcting that in my files here. Okay, and he was part of the African Cup. In fact, he was a starter in the last African Cup, started all 4 games except game 3, the B team game there. Over the past 2 years, he started 6 of their 21 games, so not called up as much as all that. Subbed in for 1 and on the bench for 9. So sorry, he was called up. I mean, he wasn't starting as he was during the African Cup. In fact, just 5 games that he wasn't called up for. So Kenneth Omaru doesn't look like the starter that he used to be, but nevertheless called up regularly enough that we consider him a likely candidate. But we won't have him in the spotlight because he doesn't look like a starter. Okay, now we go down to the possible candidates. And we have Kevin Akpoguma. Kevin Akpoguma was not part of the African Cup in 2021, even though he had played for the national team prior to that. Over the past 2 years, Akpoguma started 3 of their 21 games and was not selected for 15 matches, including the last 4. So it doesn't look like a very likely candidate. We put him at the possible level here because he plays for Hoffenheim in Germany, and we know that club affiliations are important for these African teams. So Kevin Akpoguma, a possible candidate. Okay, and we also have 2 others. William Troost-Ekong is possible, even though he's a veteran with 63 caps. He recently moved from Watford in England to PAOK in Greece, so I'd say a slight step down there in club affiliation. And Troost-Ekong was not only a starter in the African Cup in 2021, but captain of the team. There. Over the past 2 years, Troost-Ekong started 10 of their matches, including the first 9, but he was not selected for 8 others, including the last 4 matches. So he really seems to be drifting off the team here, and we can only put him at the possible level, missing the last 4 matches there. Our third possible candidate is Jordan Torunariga, and Torunariga is new to the squad since 2023. He got his first appearance in September of 2023 and started 1 of their remaining 5 games and was on the bench for 2, but he wasn't selected for the last 2 matches. So bit of an outside chance there. We put him at the possible level. And we have a couple of other candidates, but I'll just mention one who actually seems to be off the team, and that's Leon Balogun. Leon Balogun, since we did the last podcast, has moved from the Rangers in Scotland to Queen's Park Rangers in England, and then back to the Rangers in Scotland. So that's his recent club history. He was not a part of the 2021 African Cup. He was actually selected for the final squad, but withdrew due to injury. And he did play after that, but last appeared for the national team in June of 2022. So he seems to be off the squad, and we'll have to see. We'll have to see if he will ever make it back to the team. I just want to check his age there. He's actually 35 years old, so kind of getting aged out. Okay, let's take a look at the position then in a narrative. So Omaru and Troost-Ekong were the starting centre backs in the cup. And in the B team game, Semi Ajayi replaced Troost-Ekong in that game, so he was kind of the backup player. After the cup, Balogun, who's now off the team, replaced Omaru for 2 games, and then Ajayi replaced Omaru for 4 games. Following that, it was a bit of a feeding frenzy. Several new names were tried out, especially in the fall friendlies, but only Bassi made it through the trials, we would say. So after a brief return by Omaru, it has recently been Ajayi and Bassi as the starting centre backs. So we're going to spotlight those two, but no spotlight on Omaru, as I said, because he's not starting enough, even though he did also start one time as a right back. Okay, well, we already said quite a bit about Ajayi, Semi Ajayi, so I don't have much to add, other than that he played for Cardiff in England. I just want to point that out because I grew up in Cardiff till I was 10. So we always kind of have affection for players who had played for Cardiff. Really, he was with fairly small clubs in England after being with Arsenal from 2013 to 15. I don't think he actually played for Arsenal during that time, but he was on their squad. And he was born in England, so all of his clubs have been in England. The only other detail I really want to add is that he started 6 of their last 7 games. That's why we really have him at the definite level, because of his recent history. Because overall, he started only half of their games, which is not as impressive as 6 of the last 7. I'll move on to talk about Calvin Bassey. So Calvin Bassey is actually coded as a left back on one of the sources that I use, and as a centre back in my default source. And in fact, he has started as both. And I believe he also started as a left winger as well. So a very versatile player. Again, he started more games than Ajayi did, 12 of their 21. And he is, I don't think I mentioned his club, he is with Fulham in England since 2023 and was with Ajax in Netherlands and Rangers in Scotland prior to that. And Bassi was born in Italy. So those are the 2 spotlight players, the ones we think will be starting. Bassi not necessarily starting as a central defender, probably, but also may start on the left side. Okay, let's move on to the left backs, and we have 2 2 possible candidates here. That's the best we can offer. Zaidu Sanusi is the first one. Sanusi was the starter in the previous African Cup, and he's with Porto in Portugal. He was there when we last looked at him also. Over the past 2 years, Sanusi had started 9 of their 21 games and was on the bench for 3, injured for 2, and not selected for 7 matches, including the last 5 games. So looked like a promising candidate, but since he's missed the last 5, we have to put him down to just the possible level. Not sure what's going on with him. Okay, next we have a possible candidate in Bruno Onyemaechi. Bruno Onyemaechi is new. His first appearance was on the bench in November 2022, and he started 4 of their remaining 9 games, subbing in for 1 and on the bench for 3. So just one of those 9 games, 9 games that he was not selected for. And he plays for Boa Vista in Portugal. He just moved there in 2023 and was with smaller clubs in Portugal prior to that. Ferenzi was the club he was with from 2020 to 23. So Bruno Onyemaechi, he was fielded in the last 5 matches, starting 4 of them. So obviously replacing Sanusi there, but whether they'll bring that into their cup squad, we will have to see. We have a couple of possible but unlikely candidates. We're only going to mention one of them actually, and that's Jamilu Collins. So Jamilu Collins, wow, look at all these Cardiff connections. He has moved to Cardiff in the English League. Cardiff is in Wales, but they play in the English League in 2022. And prior to that, when we last looked at him, he was with Paderborn in Germany. So he was part of the African Cup squad in the previous cup, and but appeared only in game 3, that B team game there. So he's only started 2 of their 21 games over the past 2 years. And in short, he hasn't been selected for... he hasn't been selected for 11 matches. And in fact, he seemed to be basically off the squad for quite a while until he was called up and fielded for the last 2 games, coming in and subbing in for Onyemaechi in both instances there. So those are our candidates here. So let's summarize the position then. So it was Sanusi in the cup with Collins as the backup player. He replaced him in the B team game there. Sanusi continued in the position after the cup, but was increasingly replaced by actually the central defender Bassi, but more recently replaced by Onyemaechi in the last few games. And Aina, who we will meet on the right side, and Collins both popped up once fairly recently. So Sanusi looked like he was reasserting himself with 3 African Cup qualification games in a row in March and June. But now he seems to be off the team. Onyemaechi has not been around long enough for us to put him in the spotlight. In other words, we're not convinced he'll be a starter, but he does seem the most likely candidate at this point. Okay, let's move on over to the right side here, and we begin with a likely candidate in Ola Aina. And he is actually coded as a left back, but over the past couple of years has been playing on the right. And since we last met him when he was with Torino in Italy, he has moved to Nottingham Forest in England. He was actually born in England, and he was a starter in the 2021 African Cup, so all games except the B team game there. And over the past 2 years, Aina has started 10 of their 21 games and subbed in for 2, injured for 2, and not selected for 7 others. So starts about half the games. He was selected for 3 of the last 8, but had been fairly regular up until an injury in November 2022. So kind of has dropped off the team, perhaps not dropped off the team, but used less, perhaps due to that injury. Anyway, we still consider Aina a likely candidate. However, we also have Bright Osei Samuel as a likely candidate too. So he is new to the squad, got his first cap in November 2022 and started 6 of their 9 games and was subbed in for 2. So just 1 match that he wasn't selected for. And Osei Samuel plays for Fenerbahce in Turkey since 2021. Okay, next we have 2 possible candidates. The first is Tyrone Eboué. So Tyrone Eboué was, I'll talk about his club first. He was with Benfica in Portugal when we last looked at him. Now he has moved to Empoli in Italy. So he was born in the Netherlands, and he was in the African Cup squad in the previous cup, but a substitute. So appeared in the B team game there, but otherwise didn't appear there. He was actually not even on the bench for the round of 16 game there. Abui started 2 of their 21 games over the past 2 years, subbed in for 1 and was on the bench for 4, but not selected for 14 others. However, he was kind of in and out, so he has been with the team recently and was just not selected for the last, was the last 2 matches he wasn't selected for, but he has been called up recently. Okay, next we have Chidozie Awazian. He's also a possible candidate, and he is still with Boa Vista in Portugal, and he was in the African Cup, in the previous African Cup, but he didn't see any action even in the B team game there. I have the graphics in the wrong place, sorry. So Awazian is started 2 of their 21 games over the past 2 years, subbed in for 1 and was on the bench for 6, including the last 2 matches, though. So he has appeared recently. In fact, he was called up for the last 4 games there. So actually, I'm going to put him ahead of Abui here because his recent participation is a bit more promising. There, let's look at the position in overview. So though he is coded primarily as a left back, Ola Aina started in the Cup and Abui started the B team game. Aina continued for the most part, but attacking midfielder Moses Simon popped up twice in this position, and Osei Samuel started making some inroads when Aina was recovering from his injury. So Aina returned. He did return, but in the last 4 games, it has been 4 different players. So that is Ebuhi, the centre-back Kenneth Omaru, Osei Samuel, and then as Aina in the last game. So we think Aina's absence was due more to his injury than to him kind of falling out of favor out of the position. So we are going to nominate him as the spotlight candidate who we think will be the starter. So I've said a little bit about him and I will say a little bit more. He was born in England and he was with the team since 2017 with 33 caps. And his first tournament was the 2019 African Cup. He actually was on the preliminary squad for the 2018 World Cup, but he didn't make the final cut. But in 2019, he started the African Cup, started the first 4 games, but actually lost his starting position for games 5 and 6. And then returned for game 7. I think they finished in 3rd place there. So their 3rd place game was against Tunisia, who was the team that knocked them out in 2021. So Ola Aina, a veteran, not a veteran, he only has 33 caps, but a long-term player, I guess, with the team. And one thing I will say is that he is capable of, and he uses a long throw-in, almost like a cross into the box. So you can look out for that skill in the Cup because we think he will be the starter. Not 100% sure on that, but especially if he has fully recovered from his injury. Okay, we move on to the midfielders, and we're going to look at defensive midfielders and central midfielders both before getting into the summary of the position. So let's begin with defensive midfielders, and we only have a possible level candidate here. We have 2 of them. The first one is Wilfred Ndidi. Sometimes he's called Onyinye Ndidi. But in England anyway, he's known as Wilfred Ndidi. And he is still in England, even though Leicester got demoted down a league. He is still with Leicester. And he was a starter in the 2021 African Cup. Started and finished all games, and actually one of the few players to also play the game 3, the B team game there. So Ndidi started 9 of their 21 games over the past 2 years. He subbed in for one and was on the bench for one. He was injured for three, which is significant, and not selected for 7 other matches, including the last 2 matches. So the story with Ndidi is he was basically a staple. He's a very solid midfielder, but he injured his knee in March 2022, and he has never really recovered his starting spot after that. So we think if he is fully recovered, he's a good candidate. He's still only 27 years old, 28 years old, actually. No, 27. But we have to put him at the possible level, especially since he missed the last 2 matches. So Wilfred Ndidi. And the other possible candidate is Rafael Onyedika. So Onyedika is new to the squad. He got his first cap in September 2022. He only started 1 game, subbed in for 2, and was on the bench for 3. So doesn't look that promising a candidate. But the club he plays for is Club Bruges in Belgium, which is a fairly good level of club. And he was called up on Onyedika for the last 5 games. There, so he is a possible candidate. We do have a player who is off the team, it seems, and that is Peter Etibo. So I won't go into too much detail here, but Peter Etibo, sometimes called Oghenakaru. I should never have attempted that. Oghenakaro Etibo. Last played for the team in November 2022, and he wasn't selected for the African Cup. And probably the biggest strike against him at this point is that he is not attached to any club. He's only 28 years old, but he left Aris Thessalonica in Greece in 2023 and doesn't seem to have found a club yet. So Peter Etibo seemingly off the squad, and I'd be surprised if he was selected. Okay, as I said, we will do central midfielders before moving on, before summarizing the position. And we're going to begin with a player, an attacking midfielder who we've moved to this position because he's been playing central midfield, and that is Alex Iwobi as a definite candidate. So we will be putting the spotlight on him, but just to update from our previous look at the players, he has become a veteran now with 67 caps, and is with Fulham in England. He had been with Everton in England prior to that when we last met him, and he was part of the African Cup squad there 2 years ago, but only started game 3, so a reserve player there, and he did sub into all 4 other games though, even at halftime in game 2 there. And he's over the past 2 years started 13 of their 21 games, subbed in for 4, was injured for 1, so just 3 matches that he wasn't selected for. So Alex Iwobi, a definite candidate. So is our next candidate, Joe Aribo. Joe Aribo has since moved from Rangers in Scotland, where we last met him, to Southampton in England. That was in 2022, and he was a starter in the African Cup there 2 years ago, and did not play just in game 3, the B team game there. So Aribo has started 12 of their 21 games, subbed in for 4 and on the bench for 2, and like Iwobi, just 3 matches that he wasn't selected for. So both of those are definite candidates, and we'll come back and look at them in the spotlight. Next we have Frank Onyeka. Frank Onyeka is still with Brentford in England, where we last saw him, and he was part of the African Cup in 2022. There, he was a substitute, though, appearing only in game 3. and actually didn't start that game either. He just subbed into game 3, so maybe more like a third string player in the squad. Onyeka started 7 of their 21 games over the past 2 years, subbed in for 5 and on the bench for 6. So just like our other 2 candidates, only 3 games that he was not called up for. And that's why we have him as a likely candidate. So selected most of the time, but only starts smatteringly 1 in 3 games. And we have one candidate at the possible level, and that is Fisayo Deli Bashiru. And he is new to the squad, brand new to the squad, in fact, in October 2023. So started 1 of their remaining 4 games, was on the bench for 1, and then not selected for the November games. So Deli Bashiru plays for Hatchaspor in Turkey and was with Sheffield Wednesday in England before that. But we'll see. Missing the last 2 games maybe means he was considered and then discarded, especially given some of the strong candidates they have here. Anyway, let's go back and summarize the position. So when I remind you of the formation, you'll see why defensive and central midfielders are considered together. It's a 4-4-2 formation, so they don't really have the midfield split into 2 parts. Even in the 4-2-2-2 formation, it's just 2 central midfielders rather than a line of defensive and a line of central. Ndidi and Aribo were the starters in the 4-2-2-2 formation of the Cup. And Aribo also played in both World Cup qualifiers. But 3 new central midfielders were brought into those games. In one of them, they had 3 central midfielders. That was a 4-1-4-1 formation. And it was Atibo actually playing as the defensive midfielder in that second game against Ghana. The mixing and matching continued after that, with Aribo eventually giving way to attacking midfielder Iwobi, who made increasing inroads into the position. Onyeka was popping up increasingly, and Ndidi, who had been injured, came back. Oh, it now seems like Iwobi is the first choice, with Ndidi and Onyeka rotating, though Onyeka did start the last 2 games, so he seems to have the edge over Ndidi. And I think I said we'd be spotlighting Joe Aribo, but we're not going to, because he actually seems to have dropped off a bit and doesn't seem to be a starter, even though we're sure he'll be called up. So only Iwobi seems a spotlight starter, with Onyeka, Aribo, and perhaps Ndidi rotating into the central midfield there. Okay, so let's take a look at in Iwobi then, our spotlight candidate. And yes, he has been with, sorry, I have the wrong spot. He has been with Fulham since 2023, Everton before that. People who know the English league will know he also played for Arsenal from 2015 to 19 and was with their youth club, actually with their youth club from 2004 to 2015. So a real veteran of their system. He wasn't born in England, though. He moved to England at the age of 4, and he is actually the nephew of the Nigerian international JJ Okocha. So he did play for the England under 16 to 18 teams before he threw his lot in with Nigeria. So he was part of the World Cup in 2018. He was a starter there, actually, but subbed out of game 1. He lost his starting position, in short. Started game 1, but lost his starting position. 2019 African Cup, also a starter. But as we saw in the African Cup in 2021, he was a bit lower down in the hierarchy of the team, just on the bench there. However, he seems to have recovered his position. He did only start actually 13 of their 21 games, so not 100% guaranteed as a starter. We did see some rotation in the central midfield, but he also played, I believe, as a right winger during this period too. So even if he's not a central midfielder, we may see him on the field as a right winger. That is Alex Iwobi. We moved him to the central midfielder position, but he's actually coded as an attacking midfielder. Okay, next we have the positions of left and right midfielder. But if you think about the 4-4-2 formation that they always use, even the 4-2-2-2, there are no left and right with midfielders. It'll be left wingers in that situation. And in the 4-2-2-2, more like attacking midfielders. So we would say like a left attacking midfielder and a right attacking midfielder. So actually no candidates coded as left and right midfielders, and Nigeria doesn't use the position. So we move on to left wingers, and this includes basically the left wingers and left attacking midfielders. Our first candidate is a definite candidate, Simon Moses, and he is a veteran with the team with 62 caps, and was a starter in the 2021 African Cup. He started all 4 games except the B team game there, and over the past 2 years has started 14 of their 21 games, subbed in for 5 besides that, and on the bench for 1. So just 1 match that he wasn't selected for. So definitely going to be called up. And probably as a starter, we're going to put him as the spotlight candidate. And he is still with Nantes in France, as he was when we last took a look at the team. We also have Ademola Lookman as a definite candidate. Lookman got his first cap in March 2022, so he wasn't part of the African Cup squad, but came in shortly after. He started 8 of their remaining 17 games and subbed in for 3 and on the bench for 3. So just 3 matches that he wasn't selected for. He was born in England and he plays for Atalanta in Italy now since 2022. We have Ahmed Musa as a possible candidate. Ahmed Musa, also a veteran with the team with 108 caps. And he is with Sivasspor in Turkey now. He was with another club in Turkey when we last met him, and has played for different teams in different countries. He's actually one of the few players to go back to Nigeria and play there during his career. Anyway, in terms of recent history, he was subbed into the 2 games in the 2021 African Cup, so a substitute in that cup. And over the past 2 years has not started any of their 21 games, but he was subbed in for 6 and on the bench for 5, but has not been called up for the last 5 matches there. So he's 31 years old, so he's not too old, and yet he seems to have kind of moved. In the past, he has been, I'm just looking at the tournaments here, it's actually quite a while ago that he was a starter in a tournament, so has been kind of a substitute for quite a while. Anyway, Ahmed Musa, a possible candidate here, and we have another candidate who we won't put on the list or even mention because he seems too far off the squad. So let's go to our summary of the position. It does seem Moses Simon is the starter here. He was the starting position of left attacking midfielder in the cup and has a pretty tight position, a tight grip on the position here. But when he is replaced, it is Lookman who replaces him, or interestingly, it is central defender Bassi. I think when I talked about Bassi, I said he had appeared on the right wing, but it's here on the left wing where we see him. And we're going to put the spotlight on Moses Simon here, because he looks like a definite starter in this position. And so Simon has been with the team since 2015. As we said, 62 caps. He has 9 goals in that time and is 28 years old. Prior to Nantes in France, where he was moved in 2020, he was with Levante in Spain, Ghent in Belgium, and Trenčín in Slovakia in 2014 and 15, and with Ajax Netherlands, Ajax Youth Club in the Netherlands, and with a youth club in Nigeria prior to that called GBS Academy. From 8 years of age, he was with GBS Academy for 10 years. Sorry, I had to pause to cough there. His first tournament was supposed to be the 2018 World Cup, but he was injured during training after being selected to the preliminary squad, and ended up not being part of that cup. And in the 2019 African Cup, he actually wasn't a starter, but he did start 2 games, games 2 and 4 there, as well as subbing into 3 of the 7 games. And he was very good on corner kicks there. I think he got a couple of assists, but no goals in that. And he was a right attacking midfielder in both of his starts there, and actually subbed in for right attacking midfielders too. Now we see that he's on the left. But his really good tournament was the 2021 African Cup, where he was a starter. And there he did line up as a left attacking midfielder and actually scored one of their 6 goals. It was a tremendous goal, an attack from the left side. And he was so good on his runs down the left side, terrorizing really the other teams, to the point that he actually caused an Egyptian defender to get injured in trying to keep up with him. So not that that's a good thing, but it does show how much trouble he was for the other teams down the left side there. So great tournament in 2021, and has a firm position on this left wing or left attacking midfielder, although we do see he's quite versatile and is in fact coded as an attacking midfielder, but we might have to change that if he continues on the left. Okay, let's move over to right wingers, where things are not as clearly defined. In fact, we have a likely candidate in Samuel Chukwueze, but he's not as installed as Moses Simon. Actually, Chukwueze is also coded as an attacking midfielder, but we're putting him here because this is where he has played, and he is with AC Milan in Italy right now. When we last met him, he's with Villarreal in Spain, so some really big clubs there. And he was a starter in the 2021 African Cup, except for the B team game. And over the past 2 years has started 9 of their 21 games, subbed in for 2 and on the bench for 2, but has struggled with injuries over the past couple of years. So 3 separate injuries caused him to miss 6 games. And then there were 2 matches that he was not selected for. So obviously a pretty likely candidate if he's fit, but fitness is a bit of a concern. He wasn't selected for the last 2 games, but I think that's really because he was still recovering from injury. It would be a surprise if they didn't call him up, unless it was due to sickness. So likely candidate Samuel Chukwueze, and we have a possible candidate in Nathan Tella. Nathan Tella was born in England and is with Bayer Leverkusen in Germany. He was with Southampton in England before that. He got his first appearance right at the end here in November 2023 and started one of their remaining 2 games and was on the bench for the other. And given his club affiliation, I think he has a fairly good chance of being selected, but maybe it would depend on the fitness of Chukwueze there. He might even end up being a starter if Chukwueze is not able to start. And we will mention a player who seems to be off the squad, and that is Emmanuel Dennis. We last saw him with Watford in England, but he has since moved to Nottingham Forest in England, but is currently on loan with a club in Turkey, that's Istanbul Başakşehir, since 2023. However, as far as the national team goes, he last appeared in November 2022. So not completely off the squad. He's only 26 years old, but hasn't been called up for quite a while. Emmanuel Dennis. So let's take a look at the position of the right wing. And Chukwueze was the starter in the cup, replaced by Iwobi in the B team game. As we said, Iwobi sometimes appears on the right here. Chukwueze held the position, perhaps not as tightly as Simon on the left there, but Iwobi replaced him a couple of times more after the cup. And then Lookman started replacing him to the point where he seemed to be challenging for the position. So recently, too, the forward Iheanacho has played there a couple of times. And beginning with Chukwueze, it's been 4 different players in the last 4 games. So very much undecided here. I think Chukwueze's injury, though, playing into that. So we are going to put the spotlight on Chukwueze, who does seem to have the starting position if he's fit. We think he would be starting more regularly if it weren't for the injuries. So we've already talked about his recent history. So prior to Villarreal, he was with Villarreal's youth club in Spain in 2017 and 18. And prior to that, he was with several academies in Nigeria. Most recently, the Diamond Football Academy from 2012 to 17. His first tournament was the 2019 African Cup. He got his first cap actually in 2018, but probably the World Cup in 2018 came too soon for him. So the 2019 African Cup, where he started game 1, but actually lost his starting position and just came in as a substitute for a couple of games after that. However, he did actually regain his starting position for the last 3 games there. So he scored 1 of their 9 goals in that tournament. That was against South Africa. So actually played quite well in a few of the games there. And in the 2021 African Cup, I think he was a bit more impressive in the 2019 African Cup, but he did score 1 of their goals also in the 2021 Cup, actually just 3 minutes into the game against Sudan there. Okay, so that is Samuel Chukwueze. Again, we will have to update the injury situation for him when we get a bit closer to the Cup in part 2. Meanwhile, let's move on to the actual forward line. Not the actual forwards, because we begin with attacking midfielders. But the thing is, we don't have any. We did, but we've moved them all around. So I'll just do the summary of this position. And if you think about it, the 4-4-2 formation or the 4-2-2-2 formation, there's not really a central attacking midfielder there. The 2 times that they did use a 4-2-3-1, where there was an attacking midfielder, it was Kelechi Iheanacho. But we will save talking about Iheanacho until the forward section, because he does start more as a forward. We also saw him a little bit on the right wing, but even still more as a forward. And speaking of which, let's go directly to the forwards and introduce the candidates. So we have Victor Osimhen as a likely candidate, and he has he is still with Napoli in Italy. That's where he was the last time we saw him. He was not part of the African Cup, in 2021. A bit of a story there, but we'll save that for the spotlight section because we're going to put him there. He has started 9 of their 21 games over the past 2 years. He was out with 3 separate injuries, so a bit like Chukwueze there. 3 separate injuries causing him to miss 5 games. But in Osimhen's case, it's the last 3 games, and he was not selected for 7 matches during the period. So things a bit up in the air for Osimhen. But we'll come back to him. Next, we have Tara Mofty, also a likely candidate here. And Mofty has been with the team since 2021, but was not part of the African Cup squad there. And he plays for Nice in France. That's a recent move from Lorient in France, where he was before. And he started 8 of their 21 games over the past 2 years, subbed in for 3 and on the bench for 1, and not selected for 9 matches. However, the first 6 of those matches he was not selected for. So really, since he came into the squad in 2022, he's only missed 3 matches. So Tara Mofty, a likely candidate here. Next, we also have a likely candidate in Kelechi Iheanacho. We're going to have one more after him too. Kelechi Iheanacho is still with Leicester in England, so stuck with them despite the fact that they got demoted there to the Championship League. And Kelechi Iheanacho was a starter in the 2021 African Cup, and he was also one of the few to start Game 3, the B team game as well. And over the past 2 years, Iheanacho has started 9 of their 21 games. He was subbed in for 3 and on the bench for 2. So 7 matches where he wasn't selected. So Kelechi Iheanacho, a likely candidate because he was called up for 7 of the last 8 games. And we have seen him also play as the attacking midfielder and as a right attacking midfielder or right winger. Our final likely candidate is Umar Sadiq. Umar Sadiq is now with Real Sociedad in Spain. Last time we met him, he was with Almeria in Spain. And he was part of the squad for the 2021 African Cup. Started only Game 3 there, so was a second string player. And subbed into the other 3 games actually, and he got his first cap in that tournament actually, and started 2 of their remaining 21 games. But he was subbed in for 8 and on the bench for 2. And like Osimhen, he was injured for 6 matches. So only 3 matches that he was not selected for, Umar Sadiq. So not really a starter, but we think he's likely will be brought along and be a substitute in the cup. And we have 2 possible candidates too. The first one is Victor Boniface, and he's new. Got his first cap in September of 2023 and started 2 of their remaining 5 games and was subbed in for the 3 others. And he plays for Bayer Leverkusen in Germany, and that's a recent move from Union Saint-Gilloise, the Belgian team that impressed in the Champions League there. So Victor Boniface, a possible candidate, fielded for the last 5 games. Our second possible candidate there is Taiwo Awoniyi. So Taiwo Awoniyi has moved to Nottingham Forest since we last met him. In 2022, he had been with Union Berlin. And he was a starter in the 2021 African Cup and has since started, including that, has started 5 of their 21 games over the past 2 years. On the bench for 1 and out with 2 injuries, 2 separate injuries for 3 matches, and that includes the last match. So he may be an injury concern. We'll have to see. I actually don't have him flagged as an injury concern, so maybe he's recovered quickly from that. Anyway, not selected for 10 matches. So Taiwo Awonyi, just a possible candidate here. And we have one possible but unlikely candidate, but we will not mention him because he has not appeared for the last 6 matches. So we will bring him back into the list if he shows up on the final squad. Okay, let's summarize the position then. So we saw in the 4-4-2 formation that they heavily favor. It's usually 2 forwards then in the lineup. And Awonyi and Iheanacho were those 2 forwards in the cup. As we saw, Osimhen was not part of the cup, but he was predominant after. And we also saw Mofi, Iheanacho, and to a lesser degree, Sadiq rotated alongside Osimhen. But then a whole host of different players were tried out in the forward line. Osimhen sometimes there and sometimes not. And these included attacking midfielder Lookman and central midfielder Aribo, although Aribo is secondarily classified as an attacking midfielder. Awonyi also reappeared, and Osimhen was out for the last 2. So his presence is actually in a bit of doubt. But we will nevertheless put the spotlight on Osimhen because if things fall into place for him, he will definitely be the starter. And none of the other players really start enough to merit the spotlight. So Victor Osimhen has been with the team since 2017, but only has 27 caps. Having said that, he has an impressive 20 goals, and he's 25 years old. So he's with Napoli in Italy, which has caused some problems for him in his international career. And I believe it was I was a bit confused because he missed one tournament due to a terrible facial injury that he suffered, and I believe that was in November 2021. So it must have been the African Cup that was in January of 2022. But I also read a story about Napoli being very sticky about letting him go, and in fact getting in a bit of trouble with FIFA because they claimed that he was not eligible to play because of COVID. So this maybe was the 2019 African Cup, not eligible because of COVID. But then Napoli tipped their hand by later saying that they wouldn't sign African players unless they signed a waiver to agree to skip the African Cup. So he was kind of at the center of some controversy, not necessarily causing that controversy, but it's swirling around him. And I need to look into that because I'm not, both of the stories seem to be about the 2021 African Cup. Nevertheless, FIFA generally wins these arguments, and so I don't think Napoli would be bold enough to try to prevent him from coming to this cup, but that may happen, or else injury may interfere with his participation. But I do maintain that they will bring him if they can navigate those problems. Okay, so Victor Osimhen, the last of our spotlight candidates. So let us move on to section 3 and the closing, and we're going to review the spotlight candidates. So these are the players that we think will be starters in the tournament. So goalkeeper Francis Uzoho, we're 95% sure that he'll be the starter. Central defender, we are quite sure that Semi Ajayi will be the starter, but I would say not 100% on that. And we did spotlight Calvin Bassey, but we're even a little less certain that he'll be the starter. But we do think that that's likely. Left back, we're really not sure. There doesn't seem to be a clear candidate there. Right back, though, ironically, it is Ola Aina who's coded as a left back, but we're sure he is going to start as the right back. In the central midfield, maybe not 100% on Alex Iwobi, partly because he does play in other positions and partly because it's a bit of a rotation there. But we think, he is the most likely starter. On the left wing, though, we're much more confident that it will be Moses Simon. On the right wing, though, Samuel Chukwueze, if his fitness allows, if he is in shape to do it. So his fitness is the biggest obstacle to him not being a starter, but if he's fit, we think he will be. The same is true for Victor Osimhen, who not only faces the threat of injuries preventing him from being the starter, but also his club Napoli may be interfering with his play in the African Cup. So a couple of things may prevent him, but if they can overcome those things, we think he will be the forward. Okay, well, closing thoughts. I didn't have any at the beginning, and I got to say I don't really have any particular overriding thoughts here for Nigeria. So we'll move on to previewing part 2. Where we will go through these candidates that we set up here, and any notable players that were not selected from our likely or definite category, we'll point out, and then any surprise inclusions. There was quite a few names we didn't mention here because they seem to be off the squad. We maybe put a couple of them in the possible but unlikely or in the seems to be off the squad category. But if they do get chosen for the final squad, we will bring them back in part 2 here. And finally, there's always a couple of new candidates that have to be introduced, so we'll do that in part 2 as well. We saw that there are some kind of injury worries for the squad, especially for Chukwueze and Osimhen, so we will update those in part 2 and then cover any more recent injuries closer to the cup. So that brings us to the end of part 1, and I hope you stay tuned for part 2. We originally planned to tag on our past, present, and future plans for the mediacast, but we have instead decided to put a link to that 10-minute video in the show notes. It covers what we're working on and what we plan to do over the next 9 months. We would like to thank Pixabay and Alexei Ivanov of Mappa Music for the wonderful background music accompanying this mediacast.